report to this computer. Thanks, Josh. All right. So we have our songs table, and we're noticing that like that's in our database. I'm just gonna put this as like my development database, though my testing database also knows about these tables, right? Okay. Any questions on what our database looks like so far? How about that second bullet point for your warm-up? The second bullet point was, if we wanted to add some type of information about an artist to these songs, what would be, and I know some people probably already looked over the lesson, they've looked at like how to set up a one-to-many, but what would be like your initial thought as far as, okay, now I want to know about every song's artist? How would you get that information into this database so that these songs knew their artist? And I guess right now we're assuming that like there's no artist collaboration going on, there's only one artist per song. How would y'all get information about the artists connected to these songs? Kyle?
So the way I was thinking was that you would have to add like maybe like an artist ID column to your songs table.
Okay.
And then what I did was had another table with all of the artist information.
Yeah, awesome.
And then you would use that to kind of link the two.
Cool. I'm going to come back to that idea, and I just want to kind of draw out just what like I think a lot of people initially would think to do, and just kind of go over why that would not be something that we would want to do, and why that would be something that we would call is not normalized. So I think one of like the first things people would think to do is be like, okay, well, I want every song to know what the artist's name is. So let's extend this table and let's add a new column, and let's just call this column here artist underscore name. And so in here, I really like you. We're just going to put Carly Rae, Don't Stop Believin'. We have Journey, Piano Man. We got Billy Joel, and then Wheel in the Sky. We also have Journey. Okay, which like that's fine, right? We're just like storing one more thing onto this table, and that's okay. The problem then comes though when, let's say we also wanted to know like the artists, I don't know, their artist, what should we say? I think on the lesson plan we had hometown, so I'll just use that. The artist hometown. So let's say on here now, not only do I want to know the artist's name for that song, I also want to know the artist's hometown. So I'd put on here, okay, let's add another column, let's add hometown. And let's say Carly Rae is from LA. Journey, anyone know? Okay, we'll say Atlanta. Not sure. Billy Joel, New York. Journey, Atlanta. Okay, so now we're adding another thing on here. What is kind of the issue with this right now? Now that like I'm starting to add a few more columns, does anyone want to raise their hand and say like, okay, what's a potential issue of just continuing to add this information to the same table? Max?
It's going to kind of become convoluted, kind of like having a class do methods that don't make sense for it or something kind of like that. It's two different sets of information, one's songs, one's artists kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that. So you're saying like we really are essentially getting into two different, I'm going to say two different resources, right? We have two different kind of tables that we could create out of this. At first we had songs, we added like one column for an artist name, but now if we want to store more information about an artist, then now that's becoming like its own resource in itself. The other issue here is that there's a lot of repetition going on here, right? Like this row for Journey is the same row down here for Journey, right? And so we're storing a lot of information, like as many songs as Journey would have, I would be repeating all of this information about the artist Journey for every single song that belonged to Journey, right? So there's a lot of repetition going on here. So when we talk about having a normalized database, normalized, I'll go ahead and write this down here for now. So it's a normalized database is a database that has one table for every resource. And when you think about, if someone were to say your database is not normalized, what that kind of tells me is that I have a lot of repetition in my tables. So I'm also going to put here like little to no repetition, right? So like this is not normalized. Journey and all of Journey's information is going to appear more than once if I have it like this. So who was it? Kyle, I think, that mentioned creating another, right? Was that you, Kyle?
Yeah.
Creating another table. So let's kind of go back to Kyle's idea there. I'm going to get rid of all these. And Kyle's saying, let's go ahead and just create another table for artists. That way we can have a normalized database. We'd have, oops. Yeah, cool. We'd have 2 separate tables for our 2 resources that we have. So we'll go over here and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to create a table for artists. To keep it simple for us for now, I'm just going to have an ID and a name. I'm not going to add anything else on here just to kind of keep it simple. And for each of our artists, let me color code this a little bit. Let's say the first one we have, let's say the first one in here is Journey. Let's say our second one is Carly Rae. And then our third one is Billy Joel. Okay. So now we have these 2 separate tables. What did I just lose though by normalizing this database and putting it into 2 separate tables? Ash, what did I just lose?
You lost a way to basically refer them to each other.
Yeah, I lost the way to be able to connect them to each other, right? Like I no longer have this as a part of every single row on my songs table. It's on a separate table now. So Kyle also had mentioned adding a reference to this table. And we're going to call this reference, I'm just going to put it up here, I don't have enough room, artist_ID. This artist ID, what we want to keep in here is the ID of the artist that this song belongs to. So that way, the only thing that I'm repeating is just a single digit, right? I'm not repeating everything else from that table. Right now, we just have name, but if I had like hometown, years of experience, or like first album, I don't know, things like that, I don't have to put that all on every single one of these rows. I just have one integer that relates back to one resource. So for my artist ID, this is what we are going to call our foreign key. And a foreign key is used to reference resource that this table belongs to. These over here, these are our primary keys. And those get generated for you. You never have to say like Rails G migration, create songs, ID, integer. That gets created automatically for you. Primary key, same thing here. This is your primary key. All right. So for this artist ID, for I Really Like You, this I Really Like You is a song by Carly Rae. So I'm going to go ahead and put the integer for Carly Rae's resource. So Carly Rae would be, oops, not this one. I don't know why it's not changing colors for me. There we go. Okay, so that would be a 2. And then Don't Stop Believin'. Don't Stop Believin' is a song by Journey. So I would have the ID for Journey. Piano Man, that's a song by Billy Joel. So I'm going to go ahead and put the ID for Piano Man. And then Wheel in the Sky, that's a song by Journey. So we'll go ahead and put the ID of 1 there. So now with Active Record, and we'll get into code a little bit more to see kind of like where you get these methods that I'm about to say. With Active Record, and before I go into that, Sage, did you have a question?
Yeah, and you might go over it, or maybe you touched on it, but I see how we're reducing repetition, but I feel like we're also putting repetition in there. And is it taking less space? Are these keys taking up less space in a database because they're like symbols or just one number as opposed to a string?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Also, the repetition that we now also don't have anymore is I don't have to record Journey's information more than once, right? Before I would have like Journey, hometown, Atlanta, first album, whatever album it was, and I would have that for this one down here as well. Whereas now I only have it stored in one spot. Like I don't need to have another, I wouldn't have another entry in that table for Journey. I only have it stored one time.
Cool.
So that's why it's less space. Good question. So let's kind of take, what time is it? 9:27. Let's take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, I want to go over kind of like what this all allows us to do with Active Record. I'll go ahead and put a little timer up here. And feel free to turn your cameras off and go get coffee, whatever you need to do. I'll see you in 5 minutes. Cool. All right, so what I wanted to get into before having taken that break is kind of talking about like what's available to you now that we have this association made. We have the association made in our database, but this isn't really useful for us if we don't have like a way to be able to, like, let's say we had a song object. What if we wanted to be able to figure out just in our code, like, okay, give me the artist back that this song belongs to. And so having this relationship set up, as well as something that in this next class we'll go over, you have to put into the model to be able to get this actual method set up. Let's say that I took, let's do Don't Stop Believin'. Let's say I took this object right here, and let's say I saved it into a variable called just don't. Okay, that's the variable that it's called. And down here, I'm just going to put this down here so I have a little more room. Don't is a song object. And now that I have this association right here, that I have this foreign key artist ID that relates me back to the artist that song belongs to, something I can do now is I can call don't.artist. And this method right here, this is kind of what I was just talking about, that's available to us because of something we're going to put in the model. Again, you'll see that in this next class. But now that we have this association in our database, and once we put the directions for creating this method in our model, now we're able to call .artist on any song object. And what this will return to us is an artist object. So it'll actually return an artist, let's say like 011, whatever. And this would have like a name, Journey. So it actually returned that object to us. Same thing goes the other way. Let's say I took Journey again. Let's go ahead and take Journey here. And let's save this into a variable Journey. And down here, if I were to call Journey dot songs, since an artist has many songs, it's going to be plural. Since a song belonged to an artist, that's singular over here. There's a lot of like singular pluralization stuff that's going to be happening here. I'm sure y'all have already noticed that. Journey.songs, what's going to happen now is, now that we have this association set up, and also because of something that we're going to put in our model later, now when we call .songs on this Journey object, it's going to look for songs that have the artist ID of their ID. And it's going to return what looks like an array, but is actually, can y'all see this down here? Is that too far down? Can you see when I'm writing active? Okay, cool. It's actually an active record association, but it looks and it acts like an array. But if you were to call .class on this return value, it would say it's an active record association. And it's going to return to us an active record association of song objects. So here's song 1. Let's just say this is don't. And then also another song object, song 2, which is wheel. Some shorthand there. Okay, so again, this is going to be available to you because 1, this relationship is set up in your database, and 2, because of something we'll set up in your model later. I think I saw a few hands come up. Alex?
So if we add one more layer to this, like if we have, say, albums where an album has many songs but only one artist, I presume in a normalized database that the songs table would only have an album ID because the album would have the artist on it. But if you were to call it, would it be like don't.album.artist?
You could. So let me kind of repeat kind of what you're saying. So you're saying like, what if we had, let's say an artist or an albums, right? An albums table. And we're saying that the album belonged to an artist, right? Yeah. So this would have, I'm just going to put, so this would have to have, if this album belongs to an artist, then there would have to be an artist _ ID on it, right? So it's saying that it belonged to an artist. So like we could have whatever artists that this album belonged to. And then you're saying albums would have many songs, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so then over here, since songs would belong to an album, then we would have another column here for album ID.
Right, but I guess I'm asking, would you leave the artist ID in there? Or is it because you've...
Yeah,
because
I see what you're saying. You're saying like, what is it okay to say something like song.album.artist since those would be connected? Yes. Versus having like 2. That's up for you as a developer to make that decision. And mainly it's like, how quick do you want to get there? Or like, how often are you going to use that information? I think that a song knowing its artist right away and a song knowing its album right away, that might be something that like you want that capability of just calling like song.artist, song.album. And you want that to be quick like that. I would create it as foreign keys on the song table, like you had mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah. Madeline, did you have a question?
Yeah. You might get to this, so feel free to jump over it. But
Okay.
you're using this shorthand at the bottom, like don't.artist and then journey.songs. What is that like variable? Where does that variable, like assigning of a variable, happen? Or is that just like the title of the song and the name of the artist? Or
I like that question. I want to get to that. Are there any other questions just about this? Any other ones right now on just like setting up this one-to-many? Okay. Let me clean this up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this for right now. And is there a bigger eraser I can use? I'm sure. All right, so let's get rid of this. And I'm going to take this whole thing and just kind of shrink it for right now. Let's put it over here. Okay, so there's your database. And Madeline's asking, like, where did that, I put it into a variable just to kind of like show you all like what active record methods you could call on it. I want to kind of back up from there and lead up to that question a little bit and go back to kind of a little bit of how the web works, and also just like what MVC is and what's actually happening. So let's say, draw, yes, okay. So let's say over here is your laptop. Yes, there you go. Cool. And in here, let's go ahead with like what we have so far. In our app, we have this like /songs that we've set up, and that /songs is going to a songs index page. Yeah. Cool. So when we type in whatever localhost or whatever our domain is, and then we have this /songs, and we go ahead and we hit enter on it, we have that whole like request response cycle that happens. But once it hits our server and once it gets to our app, the first place that it's going to look at is it's going to look at our routes. And so what it's going to see is it's going to see something like, oh, okay, this matches /songs. I found that route. And this is going to songs index. That's what we have so far. Okay, so it hits your routes first, your routes file. And where does it go to next? So it hit this line. Now what is it going to look for next? What part of our model view controller is it going to go to?
Controller.
Controller. Why?
Because the controller is in charge of determining like which route to go to, or not which route, but which model to use to fetch the data.
Yeah, okay. And so it's going to go to your controller first, because here, like it already went to /songs. Good, we have a match there. The next thing it's going to look at is this right here, this songs. And that first thing there, that's the controller that it's going to direct this request to. So the next place this goes to is, I'll go ahead and move this up here. I'm just going to number these. It's going to go to your songs controller. So in here, in your songs controller, you have this action index is what it's going to look for. So it's going to look at this def index. And in here in your app, you have an index is collecting all of the songs for this case. So we have something like, actually, you have it saved into a variable here. And this is starting to get to your question, Madeline. So you have it saved into something like @songs is equal to song.all. Does that all look familiar? Yeah? Okay, so we got to our controller, we got to our index action. the next place that this is going to do, so we got to our controller, we have your model and your view. Where does it go to next out of those two, model or view? Y'all are quiet this morning. And cool, I don't check the chat, so I would rather you all raise your hand. It's just easier for me to just have one spot where I can look. So Jane?
The model.
Thank you. Yep, model. And I saw, when I pulled up the chat, I saw that a few people were all typing that in there. So it's going to go to your model next. The reason it's going to your model is because we have this song, capital song there, that we're calling this .all off of. And so this capital song is going to reference your model. So I'm going to put over here song.rb. Here's your song model. Let me, running out of room where I want it. Okay, so let's say, move this over here. And in your song model, you have your class, song, and this inherits from application record, and application record inherits from active record base, right? If you looked in your application record, you could see that. So this song.all that's happening over here, this .all, that's an active record method. Song.all. This is your model, and your model is looking at your table in your database. And this .all, that's your active record method. Okay. So I'm going to draw this like little cloud over here. And I'm just going to label this. This is active record. And active record is a type of ORM. And ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. So here's the thing with object relational mappers. The reason why we use them is because right now in your database, all of your information is stored in tables. And if you think back to mod 1 even, do you know how to work with raw data that's set up like this, that's in your database? No. What do you know how to work with? You know how to work with objects, right? So that's like all you've worked with. We worked with object relations. And so what this is going to do is it's going to, Active Record has a bunch of these methods that we're able to use. Those methods get translated into SQL queries. And what gets returned to us after that are what Active Record creates as objects. So for example, this song.all, go ahead and say in here, when I say song.all, it comes through in Active Record, and what it's doing is it got translated into SQL. So this ends up being something like select all from songs. Gets translated into SQL for you. And in this case, select all from songs, you're just grabbing all of those songs. So all of that like raw data from your table was just grabbed. And when it comes back then, it's coming back as this table, but once it hits Active Record and it gets translated from Active Record, now it's just this like Active Record association of songs 1, song 1, song 2, song 3, song 4, and that gets sent back. And now it gets stored into this @songs variable. Okay, so that's why your @songs works like an array of song objects, because this Active Record, our ORM that we're using, is taking those calls that come with Active Record, translating them into SQL, because that's how we're going to be talking to our database. That's how we can talk to our database. And then whatever we get back from SQL, that raw data from SQL gets turned into those objects. And that's what's stored into this @song. Go ahead and number these a little bit more. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then now that we have all of our data here, now our view is going to go ahead and pass, or it's going to get rendered, and this @songs variable is going to be able to get used in our view. So now that we've stored all of our song objects into this @song variable, that goes ahead and gets sent off, number 9 here, to, in your songs folder, you have an index.html, gets sent off to your view where you have all of your HTML in here, and you have access to @songs in this view now. Questions here? This is like a lot, drew kind of a lot out of what y'all have gone over the last few days, but now this new idea of like, what is Active Record doing? What is our ORM doing in this case? We've kind of gone over that. What questions do you have from this? Madeline?
This was super helpful. I am a little bit, I kind of want to see more on how the song class fits into the translation of the raw data.
Okay. How the song, so like the model here? This song class?
Yeah, and like, yeah.
So this right here, like we're calling the song model over here, and this is our active record method. We could have called anything off of this like capital song. What this is doing is it's telling our database, or it's telling our, well, let me back up. It's like finding the class that it's, and this class is directly related to a table in your database. So it knows that calling this like .all off of this capital song, since this is a class that we have that inherits from application record, that tells us that this is a resource in our database. We can have plenty of other songs like, plenty of other classes like you had in mod 1, but if they don't inherit from active record or application record, which inherits from active record, then you're not able to call any active record methods on that.
Okay. And then, so like our song class, is that empty pretty much and just knows that it's pulling from this database? Or are you defining like ID, title, play, length, whatever inside of that class?
No, I'm not defining anything as far as like the attributes go of song. That you can see in your schema, but I'm not defining, like this isn't where I have information about my table.
Okay.
I think for the most part, in everything that you've created so far, all of these models have been empty. And we'll talk a little bit today about what can go in here. You will definitely put things in these models. A lot of like validations for like what that table should look like, or validations on what the relationships this table is going to have, or any like class methods for those tables would belong in this model. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Danny.
So just to break it down for myself, active record is pretty much just like this filter where it turns things, like turns raw data into an object, or vice versa. Like it's just kind of like this like doorway where things go through in and out.
Yeah, you could think of it like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think another one that you've seen before is something like song.find, and you like give it a param or something like that. Like let's say song.find1. Have y'all seen this?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe in Task Manager a little bit, but this might have said like params ID or something like that. So this find, that's also an active record method. And what's happening here is this gets translated into select all from, my handwriting is getting bad now, songs where ID equals 1. So that gets translated into SQL. Like this is just a much easier way for us to write this than this over here, right? So this gets translated into SQL. This goes into your database, grabs this song with the ID of 1, and then when it gets returned to you, now you just have a song object. And that's so much easier to work with. We know how to work with those. So active record is translating these methods up here into SQL and returning something that you can work with.
Is there ever going to be a time where we're defining our own active record methods? Like if we want something crazy and unique to happen?
You can like chain multiple things onto this, and we'll get into that in our SQL and active record classes. But you're not going to create your own like brand new active record method. You can definitely create other class methods though. And we'll again go over those class methods a little bit more today. But what comes with active record comes with active record, and you can chain multiple active record methods on, and that's like the equivalent of having like more parts to your query, your SQL query. Ross.
This is high level and like really broad, but like, why does everybody still use SQL if it seems like nobody enjoys using it and like active record has been built to translate it?
Can you see my whiteboard?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason it just went away. Why does everyone use SQL?
Yes, it feels outdated. Like I'm not mad that we're using it, but it just seems like we're using all these things to get around it to make it more usable. I'm just wondering like, why it still exists.
Well, it exists because that's the language that we're able to use to get to our database. But if you're working in a language that is object-oriented, then you're not able to just work with that raw data. So that's why we have these ORMs. And it's not that like we don't use it. It's not that we don't like it. It's that we're working in a language that doesn't work with raw data like that. So we needed a converter to be able to work with objects.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Other questions on this? All right, y'all. Let's go ahead. This is a lot. Let's take 5 minutes again. And when we come back, we'll go ahead and jump into doing this in code and setting up this one-to-many relationship within our setlist app.
I just had a quick question for you, Meg, too.
Yeah, there.
Say like when it comes to like doing table joins and more complicated stuff, is there like active record for everything? Like, are we ever going to be writing SQL code in our model or whatever?
Yeah, you might. So active record is a great resource to have, but sometimes you will do what we call SQL injections where like active record fails. So if you need a little bit more, because SQL is a lot broader language than what we have access to in active record. So a lot of times what you'll notice when we get more into these like harder queries that you'll do eventually is you'll use active record methods, but within those methods, within those parentheses, you'll put some SQL in there. And that's totally fine to do. You just want to make sure that you're using the active record methods in order to get objects back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get started on this. So I was able to get my other monitor set up, so I'm gonna not be looking directly at you all. I am looking at you, but I'm not. So that's why it looks a little different now. Can everyone see when I switch between screens? Yeah, okay. Cool. So what I want to start with for this is just like a quick review of what what you, oops. No, hold on. Okay, there you go. What you all did yesterday, just like a quick run through, and then I want to start, since we are going to be working with a new table that we're going to be putting in here, and also this relationship that we're adding in. I want to go ahead and start by testing models. Yesterday, you just went over feature testing, and I would equate testing models to, if you think back to mini test, when you would do something like test the existence of something or test the attributes of something. I would equate model testing to similar to that. You did not do that yesterday. You did the feature testing. So we'll go over model testing to start. Make sure, looks like I'm recording, good. And so yesterday, what you did for that feature test was you had this user can see all songs, and you ran this test. The first thing that happened was it said it didn't have a song, so you went and you created a model for song. So in your models, you have class song, inheriting from application record inherits from active record base, which gives you access to all of those active record methods, okay? So then after that, if we look at our test, it wasn't able to create them because you didn't have it in your database. You didn't have any setup for creating a song. So you went ahead and you made these migrations for songs. So a song has title, length, and play counts. You created that migration. That was fine. They could get created. And then you didn't have this route for visit songs. So then you went ahead and you created this route get/songs. It's a get because we want to get a view back from it. We want to read something. And it's going to the songs controller and then to that index action. So you went and you created a songs controller, and that songs controller went to the index action. And then before even getting to this, the issue was that there was no view set up for this. The get is going to look automatically for an index HTML underneath the songs folder in your views. And so you have to create the songs folder and an index.html, and then we had to have a way to be able to display the song information. So in here, we go back to the songs controller, this song.all, that's grabbing all of your songs from your database, turning them into objects for you and saving them into this instance variable. Now that you have it saved into that instance variable, the view that's connected to this index now has access to this @songs. That's where all of your songs are. And so we're iterating through each of those. Although it's an active record association, it acts like an array. And we're iterating through each of those. Each of those is a song object. You're displaying the song's title as well as the song's play counts. To get started for this lesson, I want to go ahead, like I said, take a look at model testing. We haven't tested actually the songs table. So I'm going to jump into your spec folder, and we have a features folder. I'm going to create another folder for models. And in here, I'm just going to have a song spec. And just like all of our tests, will require Rails helper. And then we'll go ahead and start this off. So when you are doing your model test, the main difference here for this, this setup of this, is you need to put here the actual model that you are going to be testing. So this is our song model. And in here, I'll go ahead and I want to test two things when it comes to my model. Actually, three things. Let me put it down here as a comment. So let's say oh, this is also, my T key works maybe 70% of the time. So that happens a lot. Things to test in model tests. I would say validations. And by validations, I mean what do you want to validate is present upon creation? Or what do you want to validate about a certain attribute in that table? So for example, if I had an age, if I had a person class, I want to make sure that someone can't create a person and have a negative age. I would say something like validate that their age is greater than 0 or something like that. So there's validations that we can test to make sure that the information that's in the database is okay to be there and what we're allowing to be there. The other thing that we want to test is relationships. And that's that has many belongs to, if there's any relationships this class is going to have. And the last thing here that we'll test is any type of class or instance methods that we create within the song class. So to start with this, I'm thinking about like actually creating a song. Do I really want to like prohibit someone from creating a song if they don't give me a play count and a length? I don't feel like I do. Like if they didn't give it to me, maybe it's just like defaulted to 0 or something like that. But I'm thinking like in order to actually create a song, I really want to make sure that they at least give me a title and then I can create a song like that. Okay. I'm only saying this, I think in the lesson plan, it has you validate everything. But I'm only doing it this way because I think a lot of students feel like they need to validate every single attribute that's within a table, and you don't, right? You don't need to validate the presence of everything that's in there because let's say someone is trying to create their user profile and they aren't ready to put their address in yet or something like that. Do we want to like not allow them to create a profile if they don't have an address or if they don't have like certain things? No, that's things that they can update later, right? So you don't need to validate the presence of everything. So for this next part here, I'm going to go ahead and describe like a new block and just call this relationships. And in here, this is going to look a little different. And I'll pause after I write this and explain it a bit. Oops. So it should validate presence of title. There are a ton of these like validations that you can use. And this method here, validate presence of, as well as this word should, comes from a gem called shoulda matchers. And shoulda matchers is a gem that we use very frequently when we're working in Rails to be able to have a nice, easy way to test our database, to test the attributes within our database. And you'll see kind of like why this is called what it is in a second. But before I even run this test, I need to set up shoulda matchers. And so a few setup things for this. This is in your lesson plan, and to be honest, anytime I'm starting a new Rails app, which like you don't really start a new Rails app very often, right? Like if you go out and you get into your job, the likelihood of you creating a brand new Rails app is very, very unlikely. So this would probably already be there, but anytime I have to do this, I just copy and paste it from this lesson plan. And in Rails helper, we just have to paste this configure block here. It has to be within this rspec.configure block, but I'm going to go ahead and paste this configure block for shoulda matchers. And really, this is just allowing shoulda matchers to be able to get used with our rspec framework. The other thing in addition to this is I need to add this to my gem file. Oops. And so I want this to be in my development and test. And I'm going to go ahead and put in here gem shoulda dash matchers. Anytime you put something in your gem file, make sure that you bundle it. Cool. So now we have access to be able to use these helpful keywords within our model testing. So going back to our model test that we have for song spec. Okay. Going back to this one, should validate presence of title. Let's go ahead. I'm going to run this. What am I doing? Songs, model. I don't think I saved something. There we go. Okay, so expected song to validate that title cannot be empty or falsy. So that's what this validating presence of is checking, making sure that this attribute within my table needs to be there. And so it's saying that expected song, so our song model, to validate that this attribute title cannot be empty or falsy, but this cannot be proved. So something that we need to do in our model is use something that's given to us through Rails. And go ahead and pull up our song model. And in here, I'm just going to say this model relates to my song table. I want it to validate the presence of title. Notice this is like very closely worded to what's in the test. Shoulda matchers created their own methods so that they look very similar to the methods that we use in Rails, which makes it kind of confusing, especially with this like pluralization, singularization deal. But shoulda matchers tried really hard to get their testing methods to look really similar, to be the same methods that we're like actually testing are present within our model. So this test that I have here is really just testing that I have that validates presence of title in my song model. So let's go ahead and run this. And that's passing. That's fine. If I were to drop into, let's actually do this just so we can see kind of what happens. I'm going to get rid of this and just drop into Rails C really quick into our console. And let's say I tried doing song.create title like that. Oops. What's happening here? Create title, don't stop believing. Hold on. I don't think I've migrated. I just pulled this down early this morning. I should have checked that. Okay. I'm going to copy this. So if I try doing this right now, I'm able to get a song created. You can see this here. I have like song ID of 1. The title's Don't Stop Believin'. The length is nil because I didn't give it to it. The play count's nil because I didn't give it to it. But the database had no issue creating it without those things. Or if I were to say like just song.create and not pass it anything, it created a song for me, right? And I didn't give it any information. So if I want to have the validation that a song title needs to be present, if I go ahead and put this back in, save that. Let me jump out of here really quick and jump back in. Now, if I were to just say song.create, now I get this song ID of nil. You'll see that down there? Like it wasn't actually able to get created. So I made it so that in order for a song to be allowed to get created, it needs to have a title passed to it. Daniel.
So when you're in this Rails C, it's not like Pry where
Daniel Self, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
He might be muted.
I can hear him.
Hello?
I could hear him.
I can hear him.
Me too. Can you hear us, Meg? Can you hear us?
Daniel?
Yeah, everyone can hear me but you.
I hear you. Yeah, maybe I can't hear you. Hold on. Let me check. Sorry if y'all have been talking and I haven't heard you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, yeah, you could hear me. Can you say something?
Hello, Meg.
Hold on.
Hello.
Hello. Yellow.
I can hear you now.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Daniel, sorry about that.
It's okay. So my question is, when you're in the Rails C and you do that create song, you actually created that record in your table. It's not like Pry where it's just like a test environment.
Yes, when I'm in Rails C, I created that in my development database.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Anyone else try getting questions in and I couldn't hear you? Okay. All right.
So just to clarify.
Yeah.
With the that validate stuff that you had sitting in, I believe it was the song model, that's what's actually going to prevent something from being created in the database, that right there?
Yes, correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I'm seeing the right thing.
Yep, and you can have a ton of different types of validations. Like you could say like I said, validate that a number is between these two numbers or things like that. This is just one example of a type of validation you can use. And to look at the other types of validations you can use, I would look at the shoulda matchers cheat sheet. You can Google that. You can also just look at validations in Rails. Okay.
So shoulda can be used in both the testing and in like adjusting how the model can be put into the database?
Shoulda is just used for testing.
Oh.
So shoulda is used so that it can relate to any type of validation method that we have within our model.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Taylor?
Yeah, so my question is, with this validate presence of in the model here, let's say we're iterating over a bunch of data we want to add to the table, and one of them did not have a title. Will that like kick us out of that like loop we would be in, or does it just iterate over everything and then just that one piece of info that didn't have the title isn't included in the table?
That second part, it just wouldn't create it.
Okay.
Yeah, the issue would come though if you like tried creating an object that wasn't able to get saved into the database, and if you save that into a variable and tried calling methods on it, then your error would occur.
Okay.
But if you were trying to create it, it just wouldn't create it for you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So that's one example of our validations. The next part of this is, go down here. Okay, so we have your relationships done. We got that one. That's good. Or sorry, validation's done. The next one that we want to do is relationships. I wrote this down wrong. Validations. This next one here is going to be our relationships. And so when we think about our song and the relationships that our song has, our song should belong to an artist, right? Just like an artist has many songs, but the relationship for our song is that our song belongs to an artist. And these, again, this is given to us from shoulda matchers. And this is going to relate to a method that we put in our model. So should belong to artist. My screen keeps getting all out of sorts. There we go. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and run this and just see kind of like what the next error is that's coming up. Okay, so expected song, our model song, to have a belongs to association. This right here, notice again, like this was our belong to. That's very similar to this method it's looking for in our model. Again, shoulda matchers is trying to match, like be as close as possible without being the same exact method. So belongs to is the method that we're going to be putting in our model. Expected song to have a belongs to association called artist, no association called artist. So we're going to go ahead and take care of this in our model. And I'm going to pull up that song model again. And in here, I'm going to say belongs to artist. If you think back to this, actually, I don't think I had it written on there. But remember when I had like, don't was the song object saved into a variable, and I said now I can call .artist off of it. That's because of something I put in the model. This is where that method came from. So having this method here is going to do a few things. It's going to look for this is like the magic behind this. It's going to look for a table called artists, and it's going to try and connect this song to an artist based off of an artist underscore ID. So that's kind of what's happening under the hood. But this right here allows us to be able to call something like, if we had a song object in the variable song, now we can call artist off of it. And that method came from here. I could have called this a lot of different things, but since my table is called artists, I want it to be called artist. Madeline?
And right now, like that, if you did call that song.artist, it wouldn't work because we don't have an artists table.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have that artist table yet. Derek?
And I just want to clarify, now that we put that validate in there, we cannot create a song unless it's attached to an artist. Is that right?
Yeah, okay, that's another good point here. So we had this validates presence of title, and this belongs to also it acts as a validation, meaning that now a song needs to belong to an artist. I don't need to say validate presence of artist underscore ID. That belongs to will work as that validation.
Okay.
There's also an optional, you can also look into like optional relationships if you didn't want it to be like necessary. You can look into like belongs to artist optional, things like that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, but that answers my question. That's kind of where I was going at, is like, you know, is it pretty typical in database normalization to just always associate an object with another table, or is there a lot of situations where we would be creating songs that don't really need to belong to an artist?
Yeah, and that could be the case for whatever resource you're trying to connect, and if that's the case, you can do them optionally. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, Taylor.
Yeah, does this allow us to now chain methods onto it? So like, could we do song dot artist dot like artist hometown or something?
Yep. So just like this, song.artist.name. Song.artist is going to return the artist object, and then I can call anything off of that I could call in an artist object.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. So we had that. Oh yeah, Max.
Just real quick, and this may not be exactly where we're at yet, but how do we like identify? So you say it belongs to artist, right? And then it's going to look for the artist ID. But how does it know the difference between a column that is artist ID with just some numbers in it and it actually being a foreign key artist ID with another?
Good question. So let's actually run this test and just see kind of what happens here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few things that are going on here. I'm going to skip over this for right now. Let me skip my feature test and kind of come back to that. I want to work on just getting our relationship set up. This sometimes creates a few more errors and things that we've done before. So I'm just going to skip this little key tip. You can put an X in front of an it, and it skips that test. So I'm just looking at this error here. So it should belong to artist. This looks really similar to the error that we had before. Expected song to have a belongs to association called artist. Artist does not exist. So before we had the same thing, but it was no association called artist. And now we're having artist does not exist. Max, I think we'll get to your question in a little bit. But to kind of give you like a quick answer, I thought we were going to get a different error right now. But to get kind of a quick answer to you, it's going to look for an attribute that has a foreign or a references data type. Okay. And I'll get to that in a little bit more. So artist does not exist. When I see that, that tells me that I need a model called artist. So I'm going to go ahead and create in my models, I'll go ahead and create artist.rb. And in here, I'm going to have class artist. It inherits from application record. And we'll just leave it at that. So let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, so expected song to have a belongs to association called artist. We're still getting like that same issue, but make sure you're reading the whole thing. Song does not have an artist ID foreign key. So it is literally looking for a foreign key called artist singular underscore ID. And when it finds that foreign key, it's looking for something that has, when we put this like data type of references in, it creates what's called our foreign key. So what we need to do then is put a foreign key on our songs. Before I do that though, actually, let me do it, and then I think we're gonna run into some issues, but I think it's good that y'all will see this. And it's all because of like, I started on the songs table first and not the artists table. So we might run into a little bit more than what's in your lesson plan, but I think it's good for y'all to see. So let's kind of follow this error. Song does not have an artist ID foreign key. And so I'm gonna go ahead and add a column called artist ID that is going to relate to my artists table. So I'm going to say Rails G migration add artist to songs. Okay, that's what I'm going to call my migration. And here, the key parts of this are like this word add, meaning we're going to be adding a column to our table. And then this last part here, to songs. Whatever goes here is kind of arbitrary. That's just like for you to kind of know what you're doing. But these are like these are commands that your migration needs in order to know what it's doing to the database. So we're adding something to this table. And then the next part here, we are going to be we're adding an artist ID. So we're going to say artist references. Again, magic. So this artist references, this is going to automatically look for an artist's table. And once it finds it, it's going to create a column called artist_ID. And that's going to be used as your foreign key. So let's go ahead. If I do this, we created this migration here. And so we have like songs, artist, foreign key, true. It created that foreign key for our songs table. If you look at our schema doesn't have anything about that foreign key in there yet. The schema doesn't get changed until you run Rails DB migrate. So to put those changes that you just created migrations for into your schema, you have to run Rails DB migrate. And now we're getting this big issue. So it says here a lot of stuff, but really I can kind of stop here. Undefined table error relation artists does not exist. I needed to create that artist table before I can even create that relationship between the two of them. This is kind of what I was just saying of like, okay, I'm going to go through with this. We're going to get more issues than what you're going to see in your lesson plan. Usually I would create the artist table first before creating that connection, because right now it doesn't know how to connect to a table that doesn't exist. So what I'm going to do, since it wasn't able to get migrated, I'm just going to delete this migration. I'm going to go ahead and create my migration for creating an artists table. So I'm going to go ahead back here and just say Rails G migration, create artists. And our artists just have a name, which is string data type. Okay, so we have this.
Quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could move when you're working in the terminal, maybe like clear things or something. It's just at the very bottom, and I can't really see what you're typing.
Totally. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
So we have that migration there. Can you see it if it's at the top here? Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have the migration made. We'll go ahead and put that into our schema. So Rails DB migrate. And now if we look at our schema, now we have this artist table in there. And now I'm going to go back and create that relationship for songs to have an artist ID foreign key that relates to an artist table. Let me go back to this one that I had. Rails G migration, add artist to songs. It's referencing our artist. And again, it's not going to get put into our database until I run this Rails DB migrate. Okay, let's take a look at our schema, and that looks like it all went through. And yep, sure enough, we have this artist ID, and it's a foreign key. You can see there. This big int, that's exactly kind of like how it looks. It's a different type of data type. It's an integer, but it has more room available for it to be a really big number. If your database was to get huge, I think this is like past 3 million or something like that. Like maybe it gets past 3 million and now we have space for it. So all IDs are actually stored in as a big data type. Madeline?
This is sort of a big picture question that ties into that. So when we're like creating all these tests and models and stuff, and we create our own objects to put into that, we eventually delete those, right? Like we're just creating the functionality sort of this database. Mm-hmm. When it comes to actually putting it to use, how do you link that to like the outside database?
Like your production database?
Yeah, so like if we wanted to apply this to like someone's entire library of music.
Yeah. You mean like they, so let's say like Heroku, for example, right? Your app is done and we push this set list up to Heroku, and how do we get data on Heroku that we've already done in development? Is that kind of what you're asking?
No, it's more like, so like once all of these models and stuff are done, are we to then create like an actual database? Are you inputting everything by hand, or like does that make sense what I'm trying to ask?
Like, how do you get your data into your app? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things you could do. You could write a script to be able to like take something from a CSV and import it into a seed file. So your seed file, have y'all talked about this at all? No. So this kind of explains it up here, but I could put a bunch of things in here like song.create, title, whatever it is, like have a bunch of these created. Then I can do the same thing for artist, whatever that is, and create these here. And when you have these like created in here, granted, again, these would have to have like artist IDs now, all associated with them. But once you have all of these listed, then in here you can run Rails DB seed, and all of that will just get put into your database. If you're trying to push it to Heroku, same thing. You just have to put a Heroku run Rails DB seed in front of it.
Cool. So that's where the distinction comes between like our testing database and the production database.
Yeah, when you say testing database, are you talking about your development database?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's those three databases, right? So you have your testing database, your development database, and then your production database is hosted elsewhere. But the testing and your development is hosted locally.
And seeds relates to which one of those?
Development, and it can also get pushed to production.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we don't really speak for your tests. Your setup in your test is like whatever's in that if block.
Cool, thanks.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna run my test. I'm not exactly sure where I'm at right now. Okay, so it looks like we had that one passing. Let me go over it and just make sure that that makes sense that it's passing. So we had this describe relationships to artist. We had to go ahead and create in our songs table that like belongs to artist, saying that it has this method now that at our database level, we're able to call .artist. And then the next thing that happened was that it was like, okay, you actually don't have a foreign key for this. So we tried creating a foreign key, but then that errored out because it was like, you don't actually have an artist table. So we created an artist table. That was good to go. Then we put that relationship on the songs table. And now this is working. So that all looks good. The second half of this that we haven't tested is the artist model and making sure that our artist model can have many songs, right? There's two parts to this one-to-many relationship. So in my test for my models, I'm gonna go ahead and say here's my artist spec. Oops. And I'm gonna grab all of this again and put it in here and just change some things up. So I'm gonna describe my artist model this time. I'm gonna say, since I only have one attribute on artist, I want that attribute. I wanna validate the presence that like an artist needs a name in order to get created, or else there's nothing that's going to be in that row. So it should validate the presence of name. And then my relationship for artists is that my artists have many songs. So in here, it should have many songs. This is plural, right? Because it's going to have more than one, whereas the belongs to is singular because it just has one. So should have many songs. Again, this is a should have matcher method that's going to match up with a method that we're going to put in our model. So let's go ahead and run this. And we're getting both of these issues. So it should validate presence of name. We didn't have that in our model. Expected artists to validate that name cannot be empty or falsy, but it wasn't proved. So we'll go ahead in our model and let's go ahead and put in this validate presence of name. make sure we get rid of that issue. Okay, now we're just left with one. And now we have this expected artist to have a has many association called songs, no association called song. So when I see this, that means at my model level, I haven't given it that association. I haven't given it that method to know it has an association. So again, here, I really just copy this because the wording gets kind of confusing sometimes, and it's literally telling me the method that it's supposed to have. So expected artist to have a has many association called songs. So an artist, I'm going to say has many songs. And my foreign key is already set up, so I think this should all pass. And it does. Let's just drop into here real quick so you can kind of see this a little better. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll do the same example as we had before. Actually, let's do our artist first. So Carly is, I'm going to go back to this. We talked about the seed file, so I want to show you all how it works. So we could say here, Carly is our artist, Carly Ray. We also have Journey, and then we also have Billy Joel from our warm up. And I can create, to be able to create these connections, I can do them a few different ways. My kind of go-to for this is just creating them off of the artist object, and then that artist ID is generated for the song. So I could say songs.create, and in here I can say title and then we'll say journey. Oh, weird. Journey also has Wheel in the Sky. Sure. And then also Billy had Piano Man. Okay. So created these in here. Mariana, question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, a clarifying question.
Go ahead.
Kind of not related to the artist or anything like that, but more the our project, kind of when we're creating something, if we're gonna get information out of another table, we don't then need to identify it when we're doing our migration. So let's say since we are connecting shelter to pets, we don't have to identify shelter in our migration, if that makes sense.
The connection between shelter and pets, your pets are going to have a foreign key to shelters, and that's the only thing that you'll need to be able to connect those in your database.
Yeah, okay, so when we do our migration, you know how we have to identify name, string, age, integer, and things like that?
Yep.
Do we have to add shelters to that?
That's where so I added the column of artist references. You'll add a column of shelter references.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. Jane?
I was just wondering if this will cause errors with the has many songs, like the artists that only have one song in this example.
Good question. So it's fine if it has one. That has many is just setting it up so that it can have more than one. Good question. So these are all here in my seed file. I'm going to go ahead and run this Rails DB seed. And what that's going to do is take everything that I put in my seed file, run through it, and put it into my development database. So now if I drop into Rails C and I say song.all, I get all of those songs. That way I didn't have to do them right here in my terminal. And now I don't need to create them every single time I drop into Rails C to play around with something. I put them all in there already. Although as soon as I put something in here, it'll get stuck in that development database. So let's say here, if I look at like artist.first, the first artist that I have is Carly Rae. Artist.second, I think this goes up to 6th or 7th. I don't know. These like little methods that are here. So Journey is our one that has 2 songs. I'm just going to save this into a variable for this little session and say Journey is my artist. Artist.second. So if I look at Journey, that's my object, my artist object. And so if I say Journey, my artist object, songs, now I get, you can see here this active record association, and it looks like an array, right? And I get the information about both of those songs. It's kind of hard to see. What we can do actually is just put this print in front. It's a little bit easier. So here's what we're getting back. We get this song with an ID of 2, Don't Stop Believin', and we got the song ID 3, Wheel in the Sky for Journey. If I did, let's say like, song first. I really like you. So let's say like you is song.first. And if I take this like you and I call artist on it, now I get that artist object back. I can also say like you.artist.name and I get that Carly Rae back. Questions? Sage?
What was that PP shortcut that you used?
Yeah, PP is just short for pretty print, and you can, because when you're working in active record, it just like doesn't come out very pretty. So there's this little PP alias you can use, and you can go ahead and say like artist.all. It's just a little bit nicer to see them as opposed to just getting like printed one after the other. Anyone else?
Is that just for active record, or is that for anything in Ruby?
I believe it's just active record. I don't know. Try it out.
Okay.
I've only
Yeah.
records up when it
That would
gets
be super useful.
very ugly. Yeah. Sage, I'm gonna lower your hand. Did you have another question? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then if there's any questions that come up during that time, we'll answer those after this. Josh, do you have a quick one? Or you want to wait?
I do. Maybe this is something over the break. I was just amazed that you were able to put your cursor anywhere on the command line.
Yeah. You can press press option, and then you can put your cursor anywhere.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see y'all in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and on the belongs to method, does that just let it belong to one artist only? No other artists, just one?
Yes, just one.
Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted it to belong to more than one artist, now that becomes a many-to-many relationship.
Okay.
Right? Songs could have many artists, which is the case, right? Like if we think about like a real-world scenario, a song could have many artists that wrote it, and an artist can have many songs. We're just using this case of only one artist writes a song. But yeah, you could have a many-to-many relationship in that case. But for this, it can only belong to one.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Anything else? All right. So Ross had brought up this point of now in our tests, when I run bundle exec rspec, everything is passing, but I did skip this one test. I skipped it because it was failing, and I just wanted to make sure I got that relationship put together. Let me put that back in there, and let me actually reorganize my screen real quick. It's back. Okay. So the test that's failing is this one here, or that I skipped at least, I should say. It is going to fail though, and that's what Ross had noticed. So now I have this expected to find text, I really like you in all songs. All songs is the only thing that appeared on that page, it looks like. That's what it's showing me like is on that page, but it couldn't find I really like you, that string. It couldn't find that on the page. And so Ross is asking like, why is this not working? It worked yesterday. Let's take a look at this test. I'm gonna leave this up. I want you all right now, just think to yourselves, like looking through this test, why is it erroring out now on this line? And if you think you've come up with an answer, go ahead and just like use the raise hand feature. I won't call on you. Just use the raise hand feature if you feel like you know the answer. All right, let's go ahead. Let's keep your hand up. Feel free to lower it. Keep your hand up if you would be up for trying to answer this. Why are we erroring out on line 14 now when we were just fine on this yesterday? Go ahead and lower it if you don't want me to call on you. Antonio?
Yeah, I believe the issue is that we're not attaching it to an artist ID now, so it's not like creating that.
Yeah, exactly. So if I were to put let's go ahead and just put this pry in here and hit it in our test. Okay, so let's look at song 1. What about this return value right now tells me that I'm having an issue? I'm going to clear all of your hands, and if you had just had your hand up for that, go ahead and put it back up. Eric?
The ID is nil.
Yeah, the ID is nil, which indicates to me that it was never able to get saved to the database. Something I can do is I can say, like, if I am a little confused, like, okay, why wasn't it able to get saved to the database? I can call this on it. Yeah, errors. This is kind of nice, helpful. Also, you can use 2 sentences, I think it is. Something like that, but obviously there's some command I can like put it into a little bit nicer version. But down here, I can see those messages that like are telling me why it wasn't able to get created. And so it says, details, artists, error blank. So I didn't have an artist that song was associated with. I can also see down here like artists must exist. I'm getting like a few little hints as to why this wasn't able to get created. And so to get past this, I have to make sure that I actually have an artist made first before I can create these songs. So up here, I'm going to say, here's Carly. I'm going to create Carly. And a few different ways I can do this, right? Before we saw it as I could do something like Carly.songs.create, and then that would automatically associate it for me. Another way that I could do it is I could also just put in here like artist_ID is whatever Carly's ID is. I can just manually put it in like that too. But this up here will automatically kind of populate that artist_ID column just by creating it off of an artist object. you also can just come in here and tell it this song is going to have an artist ID of Carly's ID. So now if we go ahead and try this, let's go ahead and put that pry back in actually. And if I look at song 1, what did I just do? Oh, I didn't save it into a variable, huh? Well, let me look at song 2. Song 2 is able to get created. Okay, so we needed that artist again. And I think that goes back, I forget who it was now, that had mentioned like in our song model, we have this belongs to artist, and that acts as a validation. Like we need that artist now in order to create a song. So that's why those songs were not able to get created in this test. So let's go ahead and run this whole thing now. And now it's all working. Questions up until this point. And I should just come back, Ross, so that answered your question, right?
Completely, thank you.
Yeah. Sage?
I have a somewhat unrelated question from a while ago. Right before you started this little chunk, you had this test skipped, and it was listed as pending when you ran RSpec. Could you just show me again how you skipped that, where you wrote that?
Yeah, you just put this little X in front of the it. And then it'll skip.
Oh, okay. And any skips will show up in RSpec as pending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be like a little yellow marker saying that they were skipped. Pending.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think I saved it. But yes, that is how you skip them. Other questions? Kyle?
So I guess I kind of just have a question about like conventions when it comes to testing. If we were to have like another test to see if we could like look at all of the songs by a specific artist instead of all of the songs like generally,
yeah,
is it like the convention to like make a completely separate test file for that, or is that going to be within like this same RSpec file?
Yeah, good question. And this is something that comes up a lot in Mod 2, this question of like what is the structure of testing, right? And what we've done so far for this feature test is, I think there's like 2 ways that you can kind of go about writing your tests. And one way is like for every single feature that you have to have a new testing file for that feature. For me, what I prefer is I try to break it up as far as like CRUD functionality goes, or like my pages go. And so I would actually, and I'm going to do this now, I'm just going to rename this. I would rename this index spec, songs index spec.rb, and then anything that's on like the songs index page, I would have in this test. So I maybe like on my songs index page, I want to see like it displays the average song play count. And I could put that on here as like an index test for my songs page. It's like a different feature on my songs index page. This is kind of how I go about testing. For kind of what you're saying, you're kind of getting into what's called nested resources a little bit. Like, what if I wanted to only see a specific artist's songs? Then I might have something like features. In my features, I'd have a folder for artists, and then I'd have like a songs index for the artists. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. Like, it's partially comes down to preference in terms of what you want to do for testing, and partially comes down to which resource you're going to be looking at.
The only convention around this is whatever, if you're testing like every feature on its own, then make sure all of your tests are like by feature. Don't just have like a bunch of feature tests and then like an index spec and a show spec or create spec. Like, okay, make it consistent. That's really the only convention that we've seen and what we asked for.
Okay, that makes sense.
Anna? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah. The question is on line 6 again. Can you explain that again? You're making the song off of the artist or off of the song? I'm not getting that.
Yep. Yeah. So this Carly right here, that is your artist object, right? So when we say artist.songs, and let me do this. You can kind of see the whole process here. Oops, Carly. So Carly is that artist object. If I say Carly.songs, I get an empty array because I haven't put any in there yet. And when I say Carly.songs.create, this is automatically whatever song gets created over here, it's going to get put into Carly Ray's song collection.
Thank you. Yeah.
The other thing that you can also do, like I could, actually no, that's for many too many. Never mind. Stopping talking about that now. Does that make sense, though, Anna?
Yeah, that works. Thank you.
Josh?
I wanted to clarify when you were answering Kyle's question, when you were saying if you're going to answer every feature with its own test, then were you using every feature and user story interchangeably? Or
yeah,
is that what it's referring to? Is every user story functionality?
Mm-hmm. Like for every user story, you have one test. That's what I'm saying. Like you have a different test for every feature.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. All right. That's it. Cool. Next thing I want to go over in this, if I go back to your model tests, so let's start at, which one do I want to do? Let's start with the song spec. 1 second. Okay. So what we've gone over so far with our model testing is we have our validations, we have our relationships. The third thing that we want to test with our model testing are any types of like classes or instance methods that we have. When we were diagramming this out earlier this morning, I think someone had asked about like, okay, are those models just always going to be empty and the whole reason for it is just to connect to the database? And up until now, your models have been empty. You can also have, and it's important to have these methods in your model to be able to manipulate data in any way you want before sending it off to your controller to render to your view. Okay, so when we talk about like methods that happen within your models or methods that happen within those classes, we're talking about methods, like we're talking about logic that we are using to be able to calculate something. We're like grabbing data and we are calling a method from our model off of it to be able to manipulate it in some way before sending it off to the view. So that type of logic is going to happen in your model, okay? So let's go ahead and say if we wanted in our song, no, I'm gonna kind of take a step back and say this is like kind of a feature that I would want to have on my songs index, kind of going back to Kyle, what you had asked. Let's say like it, songs index. Let's say that on our songs index page, I want to have like a part on my page that just says like, there are this many songs, right? Just like a song count on that page. So you can see the count of all the songs. So I'm going to take this setup from above. And once I have those songs created and I visit my songs index page, I want something on my page that's going to say like, check page, have content, total number of songs, and there to be 2. I think to make this a little bit more robust, I'm going to put just another artist in here with songs so that I can make sure that it's not just calculating like one artist's songs, it's calculating all the songs all together. I'm going to create one more and have this be and so now this should say 3. Madeline.
Is there something similar to a def setup for RSpec?
Yes. Would you like to know it?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, these are all the same, right? I guess I could have the same, well, if I didn't have, I'm adding like journey to this one. But if I wanted all of this to be in the setup for any single test that I had in here, you have a before each, do, and then paste it in here. And then just like the setup, the def setup that you have in mini test, all of these are gonna have to be instance variables.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. I'll leave that up there for a quick second.
I just wanted to say on your song 3, you still have Carly.id.
Ah, thank you. That would throw an issue for sure. Thanks. I'm going to keep going without this before each right now, but I'll comment this out just so that you all have it once I push it up. You can see it later. All right, so change this up. Thank you. So song 3 has Journey now as the artist. And on my songs index page, I should see this like total number of songs that is in my database. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay, and I think I expected this, right? We didn't put any type of functionality within our view or anything in our view that's going to display this yet. So that's what we're getting our issue on. Expected to find total number of songs 3 in, and then it just lists out all of the text that's on the page already. So we don't have that yet. Let's go ahead and create that. So I'm just going to jump over to the songs index.html. This is all we have on here, but I want something on here that says like, let me copy this so I know what I want it to say. Total number of songs. And then in here, I want it to display how many songs I have. I have access to all of my songs in this @songs. So oops, I can say @songs that count, right? It's like acts like an array. So I'm just counting them all up. Let's go ahead and try this out. And that works, right? @songs is our array of all of our song objects. And just throwing that .count on there, very simple, very easy. It totally works. This though, and this is like where we like are pretty strict on drawing a line at this point, because your view should only contain presentation logic. We are sending it objects to be able to like display information about those things, but it shouldn't ever be calculating anything. It shouldn't ever be doing any type of work with those objects that we send to the view. The only thing that should happen, like I would say the extent of the logic that's within your view could be like a .round. That's presentation, right? Like round this number to 2 decimal places or things like that. But even though this is just like one small method to chain onto here, any type of like calculation that's happening or any type of data manipulation that's going to happen, we want to kind of outsource that to a model method. So I'm going to say here, instead of calling this .count, and this is like, this feels funny because it is so simple, but it's just like the first example I have for you all. We're going to call a method on this @songs, and we're going to take care of counting up those songs in that model method instead. So I'm going to say @songs dot total songs. Okay, so I'm calling it on a songs collection, and I'm going to call this method of total songs on a songs collection. I want it to return the amount of songs that are on @songs, that are in @songs. So let's go ahead and run our test for this. Worked before, but now we just called this method on it that we've never created. So this is the issue we're getting. Undefined method total songs. Undefined method total songs. That's the issue we're getting, right? So we need to go ahead and create this method. And before I even create the method, I'm going to take this total songs. I'm going to actually skip this test for right now. And I want to test this in my song spec first before testing how it just presents. right? When I'm looking at my feature testing, I'm testing things that are like appearing on my page more often than not. And I also want to make sure that if I'm utilizing a method that I've made in the model, I want to make sure that that method actually works to begin with. So in here, I'm going to describe methods. And I'm going to go ahead and describe total songs. And I'm going to take the same setup from before, just so I have data to work with. Make sure that this model method is working. I have 2 artists. Carly has 2 songs, Journey has 1. And at songs represented, to go back to this here, this represented all of the songs, right? Song.all. So in here, I'm just going to put a variable here just so we can kind of like mimic what we've seen already. I'm just going to say songs is equal to song.all, so all of my songs all together. And I would expect that when I call songs.total songs, that I would get back 3. So I'm testing just that method, making sure that this method returns what I expect it to. Here's something that's like a little bit tricky, I think, to wrap your head around coming from Mod 1, is in the past with class methods, I think you all have thought of them as just like calling it on the table itself or on the class itself, right? When we talk about class methods, though, we're talking about calling a method on a collection. So it doesn't necessarily need to be all of the songs. It just needs to be a collection of songs. So as soon as we call something on an active record association, like a collection like that, that would be considered a class method. So if I were to do something like Carly's songs is equal to Carly.songs, right? This Carly songs here, this variable is going to include an active record association of all of Carly's songs. I should also be able to call something like Carly's songs.total songs and get back 2. Right, so class methods when we're calling them on a collection. They're used when we're calling them on a collection. You can call them on the whole entire table, but it just has to be some type of collection to be able to call a class method. So let me go ahead, I'm going to run this. I skipped that other test, so the only test that's probably going to have an issue is that model test. I don't think I even saved it, actually. No, I did. Yeah, here. Okay, so expect songs.total songs to equal 3. And let me just run, get rid of this other one. I just want to run my model tests. There you go. So undefined method total songs, we don't have that set up yet. So in my song model, I'm going to go ahead and create that method, total songs. And if this is a class method, I need the self in front. If I don't have it, I'm going to put a prime here. I'm still getting that same issue, like it's still looking for that method. I need to make sure that I have a self in front of this so that it can actually find a class method. And now I hit the pry. So it's looking for a class method when I call it on a collection of objects. So in here, since I called it on a collection, right away I can just use whatever method I wanted to call on that collection originally, which was that count. And I get back 3. And this again is like a very simple example. There's going to be more things that like more logic that you would want to put in these methods. This is just a very simple example. Make sure that model method works. And that's good to go. I'm going to go ahead and unskip that test that I had skipped earlier. And that's all working. So again, just outsourcing that logic into your model method. Since we called it on a collection, since we called it on songs, that's why it had to be a class method. Josh?
Can you just pull up that model one more time?
Yep. The song model, this one?
Yes, please. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Eric?
When you were doing Carly songs in the, I think it was the song spec thingy, is Carly, since Carly is an artist, would that be an instance method since you're calling the songs on the Carly, or?
This right here, you mean this dot songs, or is this now an instance method since I'm calling it off of Carly?
Should that like exist in the artist model, the total songs method?
So this is where kind of like some of the gray area of these like choosing between a class method or a model method come in. I think in this case, like when you're deciding if you want it to be a class method or a model method, it could be something like in our artist, like off of an artist object like Carly. Maybe in our artist model, we create an instance method that just says like total songs for that artist, right? And that is totally, that's fine to do. That would just be an instance method in the artist class then. I think it gets a little bit, yeah, I think like we don't necessarily need that functionality for what we're trying to test in the index because we're trying to test all of them. But I'm just making sure that if I were to send it a collection of songs, that it's still able to calculate it for any collection. But you're right, it could very well be an instance method for an artist to be able to calculate just a singular artist's songs.
I see.
And we'll go over, I'll do one example of an instance method for the artists as well. Similar to that. How are y'all feeling? Do you want a break? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do 5 minutes. Come back in 5 and then we'll finish this up. Good job. This is a long class.
So when you did in the model for that for songs, I believe it's the songs model, you had it count, but like let me see. Yeah, so this is singular, and you're having it count the total songs on self. Like it's just I'm confused on how it's able to like keep track of how like the count as it moves through each song because of this. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
So it's not getting called on like a song object. It's a collection of the songs, right? So if we look at this test for our song spec down here, this song is a collection of 3 songs. It's an array, right? But it's an active record association. This down here, this Carly Rae songs is a collection of 2. Let's try this. If I were to say song 1 dot total songs, now this is no longer going to look for a class method because song one is just a singular song object. If I call a method on a singular song object, it's automatically going to look for an instance method in the song model. So on here, just running this model test, it can't find a method called total songs for that song 1 because it's looking for an actual instance method, so a method without that self in front of it. So it's only going to go on a collection of song objects. That's the key part. Like the collection is made up of song objects, so it automatically looks for this method as a class method since it's a collection, and it automatically looks for a class method in the song model.
Okay, that's making a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Derek? Derek, you might be muted. Can everyone else hear him? Is this happening again?
I cannot hear him this time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it might be. Let's go ahead, Derek, while you figure that out, let's go ahead and jump to Ross.
Just real quick, could you just jump to the song index view?
Uh-huh. Did you have questions on that?
No, that was it. I just had a typo.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, just had to reset my headphones. I just was wondering if you're going to touch on putting images in databases in this class.
So for Mod 2, what we're going to ask for y'all to do, we're not really going to have you all work much with active storage, which would be a way to like upload pictures. For the sake of your project and for the sake of like if you need to do an image any other time in Mod 2, we're just going to have you store the image URL. So like use an address to be able to store that as a string in your database. The issue with that right now, since we're not really working with ways to upload images on their own and we're just storing it to the database as a string, is sometimes you'll notice if you copy an image URL, it's super long. And I think you only have 32 bytes, something like that, of room for a string data type. And if it's an extra large string, then it might not be able to get saved if it's longer than 32 bytes. That's just something to be aware of. But for now, for Mod 2, just store it as a URL. Other questions on this?
I was just having more mic issues. I'm sorry, but you said that we're going to we're storing URLs in the database.
Yes.
Is that what you want us to do?
Yep.
That's perfect answer. Thank you.
Yep, of course. All right, let's go ahead then. Let's jump to, we just did an example of a class method, so calling a method on a collection of some type of objects. And let's jump to an example of doing an instance method. So let's say on our songs index page, do I want it to display? Let me just think really quick. This is, I don't have like a view for an artist, so now I'm just trying to think like, how do I want to test this? I think what I'm going to do for this next example is just kind of show you how to walk through creating an instance method for an artist object. So let's say on, like for our artist spec, let me take this setup that I had here. And let's say I want functionality. So like, let's create a class, or let's create a method. And let's say we want to try and find the average. So this kind of goes back to the other question we had earlier of like, can't I just call? So I think the question that came up was on an artist object like Carly, can't I just call like an instance method on Carly and find Carly's total amount of songs, like carly.total songs? That would be an instance method. Let's say like on an artist object, we wanted to have a method that returned to us the average length of all of their songs. Okay, so I put this hashtag here. This is something that you'll see, like if we put a period in front, that denotes the class method. If we put a hashtag in front, that denotes the instance method. So sometimes I put this in here when I'm describing my tests. So in this case, let's just go ahead and call this average song length. That's for a specific artist. I just copy and pasted this setup that I had from before in my other test, so I have some data to work with. And what I want this method to be able to do is I'm going to expect that if I take Carly and I call average song length on Carly, that I would get back, oh shoot, let's make these easier for us. I'll do 200, 300. Let's get back 250. Okay, so I would get 250 back. If I were to do it on Journey, just one, I should get back that 199. Okay, but we're testing the average on this one, and then the average of this should just come back as that. Any questions on this test? Okay, let's go ahead, run our model tests again. And we get this undefined method average song length for artist, and it shows like for this artist object. So it's going to be our instance method. I'm just going to copy this. And we'll go ahead over to our artist model. And again, an instance method doesn't need that self in front. I'm going to go ahead and put a pry in here, just so we can make sure that we hit it and that we get into that method. The first time that we hit it, we're coming from this line of the test. So we're calling it on Carly. So we got to this method based off of calling it on Carly this first time here. So if I were to look at self represents what you called this method on. So if I look at self, I get that Carly Ray object back. It shows me that I called this method average song length on this artist object, Carly Ray. So you are always welcome to like start your methods in here with self, but it's always assumed that you're calling it off of whatever you just called it on. So you don't need this word self in front of it. Like I could say self.name. That gives me back Carly Ray. I could also just say name. Okay, so you don't need that self dot. I'm fine without it. But what do I want to do here? I want to find the average. I want to find the average song length for Carly. And so in order to find the average song length, I need to know what Carly's songs are first. So if I say something like self.songs, if I have an artist object, I can call .songs off of it. I get all of Carly Rae's songs. Okay, so now I have the collection of songs that I want to find the average length of. So now I can go ahead and chain another active record method on here. And this is like very frustrating, I'm sure, to a lot of y'all that wrote this by hand using Ruby, but this is like a nice little package that comes, a little method that comes with active record. We want to average, and we get that coming back to us. So it does the calculation for you. There's a ton of useful methods like this that are available to you through active record. And now we get this back. It's written this like sort of scientific notation way, but it will get printed out as 250. And so again, I don't need that self in front, so I'm just going to take this and put that right into my method. Run our model testing. And all that's passing. Okay. And again, I don't have an artist's view at this point right now, so it's kind of hard to show you all of this as like a feature. But let's look at our songs index and just see kind of like how I can display this, just as like how we would call it. Maybe for each of our songs, we wanted to say something like, this is the artist, and we say like song.artist.name to give us the artist's name of that song. And maybe also, I said like, this is just getting a lot to be on this page, but this artist's average song length. I could call this right off of here and say average song length. And then that would work just fine. Questions on any like class methods, instance methods? This is I know it's a lot right now. But any questions that you have that came up from any of this? Ash?
Can you actually display it so I can kind of like visualize?
Let me just run all my tests right now just to make sure everything is fine. Cool. And then let's open this up. How's that look, Ash? Question, or anyone else have questions now that we're showing it? Thanks for bringing that up. Alex?
Why is on Piano Man the average song length 600 when, oh, wait, no. Never mind. I was looking at the play count.
I think I put a lot
like,
of numbers in for our seeded data, so sorry about that. And then this total number of songs is just for like our database altogether. I could also say, just to kind of like bring this a little bit more full circle, maybe I wanted to say like number of songs this artist has. And so then on here, actually, what is this? Song. This gets a little bit trickier. Here it would be nice to have that method of like artist dot total songs and having that as an instance method on the artist in this case. To be able to use it though, we would have to, if we have it as a class method for songs, we'd have to say like song.artist, get that artist object, then get all of their songs, and then call total songs on that songs collection. This is not ideal, but this is just showing you like we made this total songs a class method on the songs. In order to be able to use it, in this case, we would have to get that artist songs and then call total songs on that. Or else we could have created an instance method off of artist, be able to just calculate it right there off the spot. That would have also been fine. So let's, oops, I refresh this. Now I have this. Other questions? Okay, here's what I want to do to just finish this up. We have 14 minutes left. I know I just like want to make sure that it can be questions on things that you've learned earlier this week. It can be stuff on today. I'm going to put y'all in just like, what do I want to do? I just want to use any of the time that we have. So I'm going to put you all in breakout groups just to kind of like talk about this lesson, bring up any questions you have in smaller groups maybe. Let's just do that for like 2 minutes and then come back, and anything that comes up from that, let's just address them, okay? Oh, come on. All right. See y'all.